Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Altispeed Technologies, the show that puts you, the listener, in the driver's seat because you are. The phone lines are open to be a part of the program. It's a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. Hey, give me a call and we'll have a conversation about your tech questions or business and tech questions. Linux advocate, above all else, small business owner, and now host of the only radio show centered around you, the listener. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show. My name is Noah Chalaya. Hey, good evening to you all. Thank you for being here. We're happy to have you. Phone lines, again, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624 or live at asknoahshow.com. If you do send an email, send it sooner rather than later because sometimes it takes a couple minutes for the system to display it here on my screen. It took up to 10 minutes in our testing, and I'm sorry about the intro. It seems like right when you sit down to do a show, everyone's sending you Telegram messages and all that, and some of them can be important, so I got to take some time to read that and address that. But thanks for having. We're happy to have you guys here. Eric is calling from Indiana. Hi, Eric. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show. Eric? Eric from Indiana going once. There we go.
I know.
Hey, Eric.
Sorry, I was.
No worries. How can we help? Pretty good. How can we help?
Oh, good. Yeah, thanks for taking my call. So I just bought one of these fireproof safes from Costco because I want to make sure that in the event of a flood or a fire that my important media is obviously backed up in a off-server location. So do you have recommendations for like hard drives or other storage mediums I could put in there for all like my files and everything that I want to keep safe?
Sure. So if it's going into production in like a NAS or inside of a computer that it's going to get hammered on, it's going to get used a lot, I don't settle for anything less than the Western Digital Reds. When you're talking about off-site backup or cold storage, things that they're not getting hammered heavy, right? Like you're putting them in maybe once a week and you're dumping data to them. If you do it daily, then you probably have 5 drives, so it's still only getting hit once a week. For those drives, I don't care what they are. Yeah, if they're green, if they're Western Digital Blues, if they're, whatever. Any of the hard drive, go-to desktop manufacturers, you're going to be all right. But what I do with the drives after I have put data onto them is I purchase these cases from a company called Libvirt, and I'll have a link for you in the show notes. They're available on Amazon Prime. They're about $7-8 each, and basically it's a static resistant plastic case that fits they have them for 3.5 inch and 2.5 inch drives. And you can put it's almost like the old like VHS kind of style boxes. You can put the drive in there and then you can put those drives into like a safe or into a box or however you're going to store it. So unpaid plug, totally not related to the company in any way, shape, or form, but I have all of my offsite backups are stored in a Liberty safe. And if you go on YouTube, you can actually watch some of the fire testing things that they do. And they'll even go so far as to certain YouTubers that have a lot of prominence, they will send them a safe to try to destroy, either try and blow it up or try and burn it up or try and shoot through it or whatever. I mean, they're kind of known for being super durable. And they actually, I've got a big one. I've got a huge safe that I keep all my guns in as well. And that's, where my data goes, because it's fireproof and it's for all practical purposes, it's theft proof. But they do make smaller, like chest-like devices that you can put in there. One thing I'll tell you with you said it was a Century safe.
Well, actually, I don't even remember what brand it is. I just got it from Costco, but it seemed like a pretty decent safe.
Okay, sure. So some of the fire protection in most of those are pretty good. Like there really isn't a wide variety. You're not really paying a lot for fire protection with the more expensive safes. They're all pretty much the same. Basically, for those of you that don't know, fire protection in safes is basically just pieces of sheetrock. So if they have a very high fire rating, if you cut the safe open, what you'd find is they just put sheets of gypsum inside of the plastic walls or whatever. That will actually do a lot to prevent fire hazards. So I'm saying that because if you were really short on cash, you could actually put something together yourself for pennies on the dollar. Entire 8-foot piece of sheetrock is like $8. But what I will caution you with is, depending on what style of safe it is, they have these little, they look like little suitcases, and then you put the key in, turn it, and the suitcase opens up. Sentry is a real popular brand. I think Costco has their own in-house one even. The issue with those is, one, remember, somebody could just carry it off, and even if there's nothing actually valuable money-wise inside the safe, if somebody ever breaks into your house, they see that, that's going to be a target for them, right? So I would keep that in mind. But if you're not worried about theft, you're just worried about fire protection?
Yeah, it's really just for fire protection. I have to decide which part of the house I'll put it in, but it was mainly just for weather-related, safety.
Sure.
And fire, of course.
Then yeah, any of those safes are probably going to be fine. And I would just to be on the safe side, I'd keep it out of sight, that kind of thing. And yeah, the other thing to remember is offsite backups are just that. They're an offsite backup. You never want to rely on one backup strategy, particularly one that isn't live anyway, right? Like, so I'll give you an example. Our production servers every single night have a live rsync replica. So if any server dies, then one of the other servers can pick up from where that last server left off that day. If it crashes midday, I guess we don't really have a great backup strategy in place, other than the fact that work is usually documented towards the end of the day anyway. But after that, so there's a live replica that happens every single day. At midnight, there is an external hard drive that's plugged into one of the servers. Data gets duplicated onto that drive, taken out, and then the next day it's swapped out for an additional drive. So it's a 7-day drive rotation. Those drives get put into a fireproof safe. And then once a month, I take an entire dump of the entire QCOW2 disk image, and I store that at my house. So we've always got plenty of backups. Kyler is calling from California. Hi, Kyler. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show. Kyler? Kyler from California? Going once? Going twice? Thanks for the call. Steve is calling from Canada. Hi, Steve. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Noah.
Hey, how are you?
How are you? I'm good.
How can we help?
So, I have a question for you. So, actually, we met at Self, but I'm calling in about something else, obviously.
Oh, you're that Steve. Okay. Well, hey, thanks for taking the time to call in.
Yeah, not Steve. Yeah, well, I figured I'd call in for this one. So I'm calling on behalf of my in-laws. They run Linux Mint on their computers, and what they've been having happen since Mint 16, and I've just been too busy to try and track down a fix for this, is when they switch audio sources. So say they're using YouTube, and they get a Skype call. They pause YouTube, and they answer Skype. When it is physically switching the audio from one application to the other, the screen will go blank and then come back as soon as the audio has been switched. And I haven't been able to figure out where the heck this is coming from, how to fix it. I thought maybe kernel updates would fix it, and various other things. Like I've tried changing from HDMI to VGA plus, just a regular speaker cable or whatever, and it's the same thing presents itself.
So it's obviously happening before they... So let me ask you this. Is it integrated video or is it discrete graphics?
It's the Intel graphics.
It's the Intel. Gosh. Yeah, I've not seen that before, and I don't have a great answer for you. One of the things that occurs to me I might try is an external graphics card and see, is it mirroring that video or is it extending it out?
No, it's actually running off of a NUC, so I can't even swap in the graphics.
Oh, it's a NUC. So I'll tell you what I've noticed, Steve. I have noticed some really weird display things with the Intel NUCs. In fact, I had the first one that I had, the i5. I had an i5, 3400 gen, whatever, NUC. And one of the things that I noticed on that one was when I would plug a display in, it would just be black until the operating system got loaded, and then I would get a display. So it was picky about which monitors I could use it on, and one monitor would work for the UEFI system and I could do the installation, but once it booted into the operating system, then I couldn't see anything. And then I had another monitor that would work for the operating system, but wouldn't work, for the lower display thing. And then I had a third monitor yet. Interestingly enough, it was an Apple Cinema display. That monitor displayed everything from the time the computer started up till the time the operating system loaded. So you might try a different display as well. I don't know if you've tried that. just as a troubleshooting step?
We haven't done that because they use it to drive the media center. So
Gotcha.
it has to work on the TV.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's kind of the route there.
Yep. The only other thing I can think of to try is there is a device, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I will grab a link and throw it for you in the show notes. But basically what the device does is it takes a static HDMI image, and it then re-encodes that HDMI image for in like some sort of a standard way that displays are expected to get this image. And what it's designed to do is it's actually designed for media production. So if you have multiple HDMI sources coming in, you put one of these boxes at the front of each one of those sources. And then the idea is that the input device it gets the same kind of HDMI signal every single time. So you're supposed to be able to unplug and plug HDMI devices back in. Now, we tried that at JB, and I'd be lying if I said it worked flawlessly there. So I wouldn't go as far as to tell you that it's for sure going to solve all your problems. But in this particular case, since really what you're, in that interim switch part of it, it might actually solve that problem. Hey guys, last week we talked about Pop! OS and what System 76 is doing with it. They are launching their own distro to be sold on their computers. There's of course benefits and detractors with that decision. And we have, listening to the show this week and standing by for your questions, Mr. Ryan Sipes, community manager from System 76. So he's going to be available to take your questions on Pop! OS and the future direction of System 76, the fact that they're bringing their hardware all in-house. So if you have questions about that, today is the day to get those questions answered. Again, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. As well as Ryan, we also have Emma, who's a good friend of mine and works for System 76. She deals with a lot of sales, and Emma and I have a shared passion of switching the world to Linux. So both of those fine folks are on our short list to answer questions. If anyone has them for System 76, give us a call, 855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624, or live@asknoahshow.com. We do have the email address running this week. So last week we had a couple of people that wrote in emails to the live address, and again, they did it towards the end of the hour, and so the system didn't populate it on my screen before we ran out of time. So I'm going to answer those right off the bat this week. Keith writes in and he asks, my question is, what distro would you recommend I use for my mother? Trying to help her switch to Linux, and she wants a Windows XP-like experience. Well, Keith, first of all, thank you very much for keeping your email short and concise to the point. That's really easy to read on air. That's what I'd really appreciate if you guys are going to write questions in via email. In answer to your question, what Linux distro would I choose for a Windows XP-like experience? Well, oddly enough, Debian with Cinnamon seems to be a really popular choice. I know of, and you could do Ubuntu with Cinnamon, but I've noticed some weird errors when you try to layer the Cinnamon desktop on top of Ubuntu. Now, Linux Mint has done that very well, but I have some serious security concerns as it relates to the Linux Mint distro. But I know of some very, very well-known large corporations that are now using Debian with the Cinnamon desktop on top of it. So if that's something that you think you could set up for your mom, that is going to give her a very Windows XP-like experience. And it's going to provide her with a really long, long stability system that's going to last her for a very long time. Another thing that might work for you is Kubuntu, is KDE on Ubuntu, because the KDE desktop is very much styled like the Windows style thing with the bar on the bottom. In fact, Steve called in from Self. I was actually talking to some people from Self, and they were talking about how when they switched over from Windows to Linux, one of the things that really helped them do that was the KDE Plasma environment, because it was so similarly styled to the Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 10, all those things. Just the start menu at the bottom, lower left-hand corner to initiate tasks, stuff like that. So either of those two things, I think, would be a really good choice. Also writing in, Joseph from last week, he wrote in and said, Noah, can you tell me more about your thoughts on this device? And he links me to the Multipass. Well, Joseph, we actually talked about the Multipass on an episode of Ask Noah. However, it was our live episode from Southeast Linux Fest a month ago or so. And for those of you that may have missed it, I'll just briefly rehash it. But if you want, you can go back and listen to my full breakdown of that particular device. What the Multipass is is a hardware-based password manager. And basically, you can purchase smart cards. And you take the smart card, you put it into the multipass, and you can then enter all of your passwords into this hardware-like device, and then encrypt them with that smart card. So it requires a PIN to unlock the smart card, as well as the actual smart card, to actually access your password database that are in the device. And then what the device is able to do, there's a software add-on that can go into Firefox, Chrome, whatever, and it can talk directly to the multipass and pull passwords out of that device and enter them right into given websites. So you can use it just like you would use LastPass or how I use KeePass X, but it's a hardware-based device. Now, what makes the multipass even better is it does do something called keyboard emulation. Why that's really important is because, let's say, for example, I have a VPS that I spun up on DigitalOcean, and I can't access it through SSH because I've locked myself out. And so now I need to log into my console, and I'm using their little Java console thing, right? Now, that Java console is not going to talk to a password manager add-on because it doesn't actually show up as text fields. It's remote drawing the screen or whatever, right? Well, the multipass, if it's a 32-character password, I don't want to sit there and hack the whole thing in, although the multipass does have a screen on it. Well, I can plug the multipass into the computer, turn it into keyboard emulation, and click on print, and it will actually dump the password as if it was a USB keyboard right into the field. So I can use it for anything that I could type with my keyboard, which is really fantastic. So yeah, I very much like the device, slowly migrating myself over to the multipass because I like the idea that it's hardware based. I like the idea that I don't have to maintain this database that may become out of date, or maybe the software vendor stops working or whatever. And I also like that it's true two-factor. It's something I have and something I know, which is always a very secure way to have your stuff managed. I really like it. So multipass has 2 thumbs way up from the Ask Noah Show. Again, more information on the episode from Southeast Linux Fest. Jared is calling from California. Hi, Jared. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show. Oops, I didn't click the button. Sorry, Jared. There you go. Hi, Jared. How are you?
Hey, Noah. How are you?
Excellent. How can we help today?
Hey, I have a question for you. I'm trying to do, for my wife, streaming to Facebook, and we're using OBS, and we've got the Logitech C922 camera, but I'm noticing for and we're using Linux, obviously, but I'm noticing on our final product, the frame rate seems like it's kind of jumpy, and it takes a long time for that camera to focus. And she's kind of moving like really close to the camera and back to the camera a lot. So I'm thinking maybe we need to up our game and get maybe like an actual video camera and a capture card. And I was wondering if you had any recommendations along those lines.
Okay, well, I'll answer your question first. The answer to your question is I would use a Magwell capture card. So it is a USB 3.0 capture card. They're a little spendy. They're about $300. They're available on Amazon. Again, we'll throw a link in the show notes for you. But basically what it does is it exposes an HDMI capture port as if it was a V4L device. So it comes in, it'll work on Linux, everything that a regular webcam would work, except you can plug in high fidelity, studio grade camera, stuff like that. They also make it an SDI version if you really want to get, up your pro level. But you don't probably need to do that to fix the issues that you're talking about. So for the frame rate issue, have you specified the frame rate inside of OBS?
We didn't. I just let it do the automatic, whatever it comes up with. So at this point, I think it's just whatever it comes up with.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense. So basically, that's what I would do too to start, because oftentimes when you don't know. If you don't have a reason to stray from the defaults, I would just leave them at default, right? But I'll tell you, the reason that you're running into a frame rate issue is the camera is trying to adjust the frame rate and the quality, and you can hard set those inside of OBS. It's a very simple thing to do. You simply double click on your capture source, and you'll see a drop down, and it will say, depending on which camera you said you have the C920, so you'll have the option for 1080p. You'll have the option for 30 frames per second. I would just hard set those, and in fact, I would. Depending on what you're streaming out, so if you're outputting 720, to Facebook or whatever, then I would hard set it at 720, the input, unless you're doing like a crop.
Okay.
But yeah, if you hard set those, that will take care of your frame rate issue, almost guaranteed. And we've had that same issue numerous times, and that's how we fixed it. Now, the second issue, which is your focus issue, there is a application, and I was trying to Google it while you were talking. I couldn't quite find it, but there's a software application, and basically it's a little package that you install, and it gives you just a plethora of control options for the camera. You can adjust the gamma, you can adjust the contrast, you can adjust the focus. All of those things are exposed, and they have little sliders, and so you can actually set the focus, and I believe you can just lock it, and then the camera won't refocus. So the answer to your question is manual USB capture, and if you have the money for it, there's actually a PCI version that's going to give you way better reliability, because anything over USB, it's fine if you just have one camera. It's not fine when you start getting into the 3, 4, 5. You're going to run out of USB bandwidth. But I don't think you'd have to spend any money to actually solve your problem. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. And I will. What I'll do, Jared, is I will go and see if I can find that software package for you. I can't remember. It's something so simple. It's like V4L control panel or V4L CP or something like that. And I'll find that for you, and I'll throw that in the show notes. Again, if you have questions for System 76, 855-450-NOAA. That's 1-855-450-6624. We have both Emma and Ryan available to you to answer your questions about System 76 hardware, or the future of System 76, where they're going, what they're doing with their own operating system. Now, last week I said, or maybe it was the week before, but I said that we don't talk enough about virtualization on Linux. So tonight, we're going to do that. Now, the last few weeks, I've been living virtualization in Linux day in and day out. And it's been kind of fun because one of my good friends, not Chris Fisher, but a different Chris, a good friend of mine, he is at the same time, I was going through this and kind of digging really deep into Linux virtualization. He's kind of doing the same thing. And so we've been kind of Linux virtualization buddies, and he had another commitment tonight, so he wasn't able to make it, but I did invite him. He says he might be able to come tell me about his progress next week, though. And over the years, I have collected quite a few virtual servers from a number of VPS providers. Now, if you have one, if you have 2, 3, even if you have 10 virtual servers, there is no other way to go. Just keep your stuff on a VPS provider, because they're going to back up the host. They're responsible of making sure that the thing is running. And it's going to be a really great experience for you, and it's not going to cost you very much money. That's not to say that you're never going to lose data, because I have had VPSs crash, and as of no fault of the VPS, I was maintaining my virtual server just fine, and they had a host failure, and I lost data. In fact, one such failure actually cost us calls one week on the Ask Noah show. But in the business world, we refer to this as economy of scale, because if you have 3 servers, it just isn't worth the scale of how many servers you have isn't worth to host it yourself. So you just pass it off to a provider. Now, how you arrive at that is you say, so I have 10 virtual servers and they're $3.50 each, then the total cost per month is $35. Well, there's no possible way that you can buy and maintain a server for $35 a month, not even close, right? But let's say, for example, you had 1,000 servers at $3.50 each. Well, now you're talking about $2,500 per month. Well, for $2,500 a month, I can rent a data center for $500. I can buy 3 R930s. I can cluster them. I can budget to replace the hard disks and the power supplies, which are the 2 most often things that fail. And even at that point, I would still be saving money after a couple months. In the business world, we call this a break-even analysis. So at some point in the last month or so, the bucket kind of tipped for me, and I was now spending more on VPSs than I really wanted to. And so I looked into a number of different options. The first thing we looked at is hosting, like coloing. So basically what a colo is there are data centers that open up. They have, massive fiber lines that come in, usually 2 or more different data connections. So for redundancy, they cool these rooms, down to the appropriate level for servers. They stack racks inside of them. They implement a lot of really great physical security. This is the one in particular that we looked at, had biometrics, so they had a fingerprint, plus you had to sign in, show ID, credentials, that kind of thing. They had 24/7 access. They also had data center technicians on hand for the low cost of $160 an hour. And we haven't actually ruled that out completely. We may go that route eventually, because the data center is only about 60 miles south of us, and it would. It turns out when you live in North Dakota, power is really, really cheap, and so data centers around here will give you a 120/20 circuit. for next to nothing. And that's not the case other places in the country. So I have a good friend of mine lives in California, and he hosts he's got a lot of his machines that he just couldn't afford to run in his house anymore. And so he rented some space in a data center. And I said, geez, man, because he's using it just for, he's using it for project development. He's developing Linux distribution stuff. So it's all out of his pocket. He's not, turning around making a profit on this stuff. And I asked him, I said, how can you afford to spend that $450, $500 a month, to rent this data center? I mean, geez, man, that's got to be a lot of money just to have the quote unquote proper way to house your service. And he said, listen, I couldn't pay for power in California for those machines for what the data center is costing me. It just totally destroys it. And so my power bill would be at least that much, if not more. So for him, it makes a lot of sense. Well, out here, they don't care about power. We got plenty of power. So here's where Linux steps in and kind of saves the day. So most of you have heard of Citrix Xen Server, and many of you are familiar with VMware. And I've had my own battles with all of these different systems, including but not limited to Hyper-V. But what we don't talk enough about on this program, and what really deserves a little bit more attention in the Linux community, is Libvirt and QEMU. Because the virtualization technology on Linux is absolutely fantastic. So Libvirt, if you're not familiar with it, is an open source API, a daemon, and a management platform for virtualization. So you can use it to manage KVM, you can use it to manage Xen, you can use it to manage VMware ESXi, and basically the virtualizer on Linux is QEMU, which is it actually is in the kernel. So it's actually the hypervisor built into the kernel, which is pretty neat. Now things like VMware are great if you have the money for it. But the reality is, if you actually dig into it and look at it, you can get the same things done with Libvirt and QEMU on KVM. And so what we've done is we went ahead, we rented a few dedicated servers, and they cost us about $75 a month. And then we virtualized them. So these, to give you an idea what these machines are, these are, I believe, 1270 V6 CPUs. They have 32 gigs of RAM, and I believe it's two terabyte hard drives in a software RAID. So they're beefy enough machines to handle quite a few different virtual servers. And of course, with the two physical hosts, if one goes down, we've got redundancy there and a backup. And then we used a technique that you can run on your VPS, and this is really cool. Basically, what it does is it takes a image of your virtual disk. So let's say you have a disk on DigitalOcean or on OVH or on even Linode. You can take an image of that disk and you can transfer it over SSH to a QCOW2 file. Now, if you're not familiar with what QCOW2 is, there are two ways to, well, there's many ways, but the two most popular ways right now to do virtual disks are raw files, which is basically, it just basically makes a block of, takes a block out of the hard drive and says, okay, I'm going to make an image file this big, and I'm going to use it as a virtual hard disk. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is QCOW2. Now, QCOW2 has almost the same performance as RAW. So you take a very minimal performance hit, but it's much more flexible. And it enables you to do things like live snapshotting. You can do live host migration. So one of the things I was playing with is I just did it. In fact, I was doing it over Telegram just to show other people because I thought it was so novel. Is I had this virtual machine running on one host, and then I have a virtual host at my house, and I just set up an NFS share between the two, and I was migrating between the two hosts. So I said, oh, okay, I'm going to take it from the data center, move it to my house. Okay, now I'll take it from my house and move back to the data center. And you can do that live. I can migrate it back and forth. And it's just some really cool things. And my understanding is that you have to use the QCOW2 data file to do that. But that it's basically for lack of a more elaborate explanation, it's a virtual hard disk. And you can turn any virtual private server into a QCOW2 file. Now, once we have it into a QCOW2 file, then I can open it with any virtualizer. I could open it with Hyper-V, I could open it with VMware, and I'm, of course, using QEMU with Libvirt. So we migrated those QCOW2 files to the new virtual host, and then we spun them up. Now, I know what you're thinking. You guys are thinking, no, that sounds like a lot of work. That sounds like a big hassle. That sounds very complicated. It's going to be really hard. It's not. And in fact, I'll make you a bet. If you were to head over to the show notes right now, this is assuming you're not listening live, of course, and you check out the links that we have in our knowledge base there to set up the virtual host. And I did it on CentOS 7. At the time when I was originally setting all this up, it was CentOS 6, so the commands are still for CentOS 6, but they forward. So it's things like service instead of systemctl. We haven't updated it, but it works. But I'll make you a bet. You run those 4 commands, and that's all it is, 4 commands. And you could have your virtual host set up under CentOS in no time at all. It's another 4 commands to transfer the VPS image. So that entire script I was talking about to move your virtual machine over, it's only 5 commands. And it's a fairly brain dead thing to do. And what's cool to me is that all of these virtual infrastructures are able to work with one another. So for example, I had a lot of machines that I was running in VirtualBox that I was using for testing and stuff like that. And I was like, well, now I have this big server. I'll just move those up there. I wonder if I can move my VDI files. Well, turns out there's a command to convert VDI files to QCOW2 files. And once you do that, then I can move those up to my virtual infrastructure, and now I can access those remotely, on the net, public IP, the whole 9 yards. It's really cool. Yeah, if you started doing it right now, you'd probably be set up and done by the end of the radio program. Now, for those of you who are wondering, yes, I have set up a virtual host on a virtual machine. So in other words, I've gone and rented a VPS and I've set that up as a virtual host. I'm not saying that's a smart thing to do. I'm not saying it's a good thing to do. I'm not saying it's a useful thing to do. But it works. So, why that's important, or why I would do that, or the advantage here is if you want to try to see if this works, I don't know if some of you haven't rented a dedicated server, it is not as simple as you click on the button and the service shows up. So, they have data center technicians that have to go power the machine on, and then they add it to your portal, and then you got to deal with all the IP stuff. And it takes a little bit to actually get the thing set up. So if you don't want to go through all that hassle and you just want to say, could I, and then there's the expense of it too, right? Like $75 is a lot of money if you don't even know if it's going to work. So you can try it on a $5 VPS. See if it works for you. If it works, then you can go the rest of the way. But then once you get the thing set up, it's slick, because managing the virtual servers for me anyway, has gotten way easier. I have it set up. I use a program called Virt Manager, and Virt Manager is a graphical program that will allow you to access your virtual infrastructure. You can manage all of them. You can manage, VMware, you can manage all these things, but I'm using Libvirt with QEMU. And it pulls it right up, and I can get console access to them. So Virt Manager, because it's connecting over SSH, it respects things like my YubiKey. So I have true 2-factor authentication into my server. I can do multiple windows, so I can open up 5 different servers at once and cascade them across my desktop if I want to. Virt Manager is running locally, so all of the screens are being drawn locally, which means that it's a way more responsive environment. So, and that I was noticing that when I was setting up some of the servers that have graphical heads on them, I had one time where I was setting up my X2Go, cloud client, whatever you want to call it, had X2Go open in one window and I had Virt Manager in the other one. And I'm like, geez, man, I set the resolution so it takes up the whole screen. I wouldn't even notice a difference. It's that responsive. And the other thing that is interesting is OVH, which is where we rented the dedicated server from. They don't have a recurring fee for static IPs. So you pay a $3 setup fee one time, and then you're good for as long as you keep your server. And that's critical here, because in a world where IPv4 is running short and yet still so very necessary, there is little penalty for eating up a huge block of IPv4 addresses. And what that translates to is the more virtual machines I can spin up, the more cost-effective this decision to rent the server has become. And so what has happened, what that really translates to in English, is that Noah has spent the last couple days spinning up a virtual server for everything under the sun that he's ever wanted and then some, because it doesn't cost me. It cost me $3 one-time fee. And for that, I can spin up a bunch of these servers. And the thing is, we're talking about resources, right? I had discussions with a couple people and they're like, man, 32 gigs of RAM, that's not a lot when you're talking about a virtual host. And there's, one gentleman I was talking to, he's like, yeah, the virtual host that we have is 195 and we're still short. I'm like, here's the thing. A lot of you guys are running Windows guests. And so you're talking about 1, 2 gigabytes, 4 gigabytes per virtual machine. And I'm not doing that. I'm running headless Linux servers. And I'd say The vast majority of my Linux servers, vast majority, are 512 megs. That's what they're running on. And they run great with that. They don't need, Linux does not need a lot of memory for a lot of the stuff that it's doing, especially for those little piddly things that, like little web servers that are running, or, we have an Apache, virtual host redirector, all those things. They just don't require a lot of memory. And so you can get away with spinning up, a bunch of these servers with 512 megabytes of RAM. Well, why not just run them all in one server? No, why not just, spin up one virtual server with, 4 gigs and then have it do a bunch of these things? Compartmentalization. Right? That's a key thing, is I have the ability to say I can split this machine up, that machine up, that machine up. And if one crashes, if something tanks or something gets compromised, the rest of them are safe. So it's a very cool system. I'm talking more about that in a little bit, but I have holding here Ryan Sipes from System 76. Last week, we talked about Pop! OS and System 76's new direction. And so, again, if you have questions, 1-855-450-NOAA, that's 1-855-450-6624, and we'll put you in touch with Ryan. Or if you get questions about purchasing new System 76 hardware, you can talk to Emma. She's standing by as well. Hey, Ryan, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, it's good to be on, Noah.
Hey, glad you can make it. So I understand that the last week there are probably a lot of people that are very excited about the Pop! OS, and there are probably a lot of people that are skeptical. And you've had probably to deal with both sides, I would imagine.
Yeah, but that's the nature of open source, so it's a good thing.
Okay.
All ideas should be scrutinized, and people should feel free to provide their feedback on open source projects. So that's really healthy.
Fair enough. Tell me this: what do you see as the most dangerous aspects of this? Like, where do you see the biggest pitfalls? Where do you see the biggest risks in this going forward, making your own OS?
The biggest risks. It's probably going to be a little bit different than what most people would imagine. I would say the biggest risks are teaching people where to go for resources, such as Ubuntu. There's a lot of documentation around Ubuntu. There's a lot of documentation that uses the name Ubuntu.
Sure, name recognition.
And so one of the challenges I see that we're going to have to undertake is teaching people that they're using a stable Ubuntu base, and that those tutorials that they find out on the web for certain changes that they typically make to their Ubuntu installations apply to Pop! OS as well. But we're also putting quite a lot of time into docs right now, and they're going up on pop.system76.com/docs. And right now there are only a few, but we've got quite a few of us here in the office who are just detailing every little thing that we can, and we're going to continue doing that, and hopefully that will be a really great resource to answer people's questions when they try out Pop! OS for the first time.
Well, and we talked about Linux Unplugged. I mean, I know it's no secret between you and me. We have a difference of opinion on some of these things, but the reality is, if there is one company that I would love to see take on the challenge of building an OS and integrating it into, their own hardware, it would definitely be System 76. So how does it concern you at all, some of the negative feedback you've gotten even from the people within the System 76 community? And I don't mean in the company, obviously, but I mean a lot of the people that have been hardcore supporters are still saying, like, man, I don't know, this seems like this may be a rocky idea. Does that concern you guys at all?
Well, it'll concern me more if they feel that way once we're out of alpha.
Okay.
The truth is, we're still in alpha, and although we've done a lot of ideation and a lot of and put some of the stuff out there, like recently we put out our development approach, which I think people can read and begin to see the difference between our approach and other distributions approach. It's through this research and modeling method, where we're going to be doing user testing and going through a process to see what actually improves the experience, what actually, makes people more productive on the platform. I think that that's going to begin to differentiate us from other distributions. But right now, the alpha is a test of a lot of the infrastructure needed in order to produce an operating system. Okay. So people kept asking, why does it seem like it's like nothing has changed. Well, we needed to test how to distribute this thing, what problems we would run into off the bat, and so right now the alpha allows us to kind of test those systems and make sure that they're ready for when the actual release hits. But and some of it's getting feedback. We didn't want to make a lot of assumptions and then have our users hate those assumptions. Mm-hmm. So by producing something that says, here we're going to diverge a little bit from the Ubuntu vision. This help us decide what's actually important and help us do this user testing to determine what actually will help improve workflow, what actually will help professionals using Linux as their platform to get more work done.
Yeah, okay.
And so
let me ask you this, right?
We're
Go ahead.
Still early days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is. It's early days. And I'll tell you what, I have played with it. I've taken a look at it, and I think it looks really, really, really slick. I really like the direction that you guys are going. I definitely can see how there's more cohesiveness and stuff like that. But I guess the thing I struggle with is what would have been wrong with taking those admittedly very excellent modifications you've made to GNOME and just submitting those upstream?
I think that if you ask anybody who's running Arch or running, another rolling distribution, they would say Ubuntu doesn't move fast enough. We have users who really are doing big things, and they need the more current software. They need certain features, or they're running something that's honestly anywhere from two years to 6 months behind. And I think we're going to try to be a little more iterative and give people, as much software as soon as possible and not have them having to wait 6 months to get them, the new and shiny. But also, I was looking today.
So hold on. I've got two follow-up questions. So the first is, wasn't part of the original reason that you guys started this track was because of the pending changes that were coming to your users, that all of a sudden, Unity is getting ripped out from under, your large user base, and as a system integrator that, specializes in, walking alongside those users, then you had to make some decisions to make sure that they had a comfortable transition. Was that not was that a part of why you guys went down this track to begin with?
No, I think that's something that's been propagated on the internet. I don't think that doesn't reflect the reality over here.
Okay,
the reality is that we wanted to, we wanted to ship Unity 8 for a long time, but Unity 8 never came.
Sure.
And that kind of, as following that, we had conversations about what we thought a great experience would be. A great Linux desktop experience. And we started thinking through all these ideas, and then we realized maybe we shouldn't be waiting on anybody anymore to implement these things. Maybe we should implement them ourselves, or pull in the community around interesting ideas that we have or that we work collaboratively with the community to come up with.
Fair enough. Let me ask you this: How is System 76 addressing some of the concerns that users and the community have?
Well, right now we're doing a lot of ideation on our subreddit. Just today we were talking about how, Node.js in the repo is 4.7.2, and the LTS on the website is 6. I think somebody's going to correct me on this, but 6.11.
Yeah, that's fine.
And the most current version of Node is 8.11. Mm-hmm. That's not the people. I started asking online, where how do you install Node? They were like, go and grab the PPA, go and grab the repo.
Sure.
And that's like, do you ever try, to get it from the distro? No, it's too old. It's always been too old.
That's fair, Ryan. That's fair. And I deal with this on a daily basis, right? Like I'm the guy on the front lines that's sitting there with the client going, okay, we're going to have to get a PPA to get this version in here. But here's what I've seen. What I've seen in the field is that a lot of people go to Ubuntu because it's Ubuntu. And so you have this infrastructure that is built around Ubuntu. And I guess my question is, is Ubuntu going to be offered as an option when you purchase System 76 hardware? Because even if you make the most amazing operating system in the world, it's technically superior, it looks better, it has more current up-to-date software, you still have, like universities are a great example. You still have universities that, due to the way that their grant programs go, are going to mandate that they run Ubuntu on those machines. And how can System 76 address those concerns?
How can we address those concerns?
Yeah, like,
by having a superior experience.
Okay, so I guess what I was asking was, so it won't be like you won't even offer the option to order a machine with Ubuntu, or that's not a current plan anyway.
Eventually on laptops and desktops, it will be Pop OS.
Okay.
The LTS will be around until the new LTS, but
sure.
I think I think there's a lot of negativity around a newcomer.
Yes.
In this space, and a lot of questions around whether or not we're going to be able to do it. But I think people should be asking, how big is the Ubuntu desktop team?
Mm-hmm.
I know, but I don't think most people know. They say a company of our size can't do it. We 85% of our work goes. 85% of what we sell is a Linux desktop, and
sure.
And so a lot of our work goes into Linux desktop, and so we're company focused on the Linux desktop, and I think that we can add a lot of value for people who use the Linux desktop in order to accomplish their work,
mm-hmm.
and I don't think that anyone else is focused on the Linux desktop as much as we are.
Fair enough.
I don't think any other company is.
Fair enough.
We're gonna try our hand at it, and if people don't like it, they don't have to run it. But I think people are going to love it, and I think people will run it.
I'm not sure that as people aren't afraid they're not going to like it. I think they just have a healthy amount of concern for the fact that man, this is a big decision for you guys. So, and I mean, we're all rooting for you. I hope it goes well. Been System 76 customer for a long time, and I'd like to continue to be a System 76 customer for a long time to come. So we got to leave it there, Ryan. I appreciate you calling in. Thanks so much for taking the time to be here.
No problem, Noah, and I hope that you'll also become a System 76 community member and maybe share some of your ideas on our subreddit.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I'd love to chat more offline and stuff. And again, huge thanks to you guys for what you guys are doing, and we wish you all the best. Brandon is calling from Canada. Hi, Brandon. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hi. My question for you, Noah, is how can DRM benefit the HTML5 standard? I'm mainly asking because I want to see the devil's advocate point of view. Everybody's saying that it's terrible. It's a defeat for the open internet. But is there an upside to it?
No, there's not an upside to it. There's no upside to DRM whatsoever. I will give you told my call screener you wanted to hear the devil's advocate position, so I'll give it to you if you want to hear it. But the reality is the problem with some of these positions is that you have to take out logic and you have to ignore the way that human beings behave in order for these explanations to make sense. So here, I'll give it to you. Here is the devil's advocate position for DRM. Companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes to develop content, movies or software or video or music or whatever it is. And these companies, their only incentive to continue to make this content is to get rewarded in the form of capital where they resell their content. And certainly neither you nor I would want anyone to steal content, right? And this is the part where you say yes. Right. So, okay, fine. So if we all agree that stealing is bad and wrong, well, then what we should do is we should institute some sort of software control mechanism that will prevent people from stealing. So as long as you're acquiring content from Netflix, as long as you're acquiring content from, Hulu Plus or whatever, as long as you're paying your $9 a month and you open Chrome and run Netflix, you won't have any problems viewing your content. That'll be perfectly fine. And so what's the big deal if all we do is prevent people from stealing this content? That's the argument. Here's all of the logic that you have to ignore for that argument to make sense. First of all, it entirely excludes people like you and me who don't consume content the normal way. I don't want to consume my Netflix content in my web browser. I want to watch Netflix content on my Western Digital TV Live that was made 10 years ago, but I really like it because it plays local media content, has 12 volts at 2 amps, so it means I can take it in my camper with me. That's how I want to consume my content. Also, by the way, that means that I won't have an internet connection, so somehow I have to get that media off of Netflix's server and onto my device, whatever that is. Or I want to take something like what's the stupid thing they always give you in the violet ultraviolet or whatever? It's like the digital alternative to Blu-rays. That thing requires some stupid software package that only runs on Windows. And so you have to download the stupid software package, and then you can view these digital movies. Well, that doesn't make any sense because there's people there's people that don't use my Windows or Mac OS, so that. There's another example where that's not going to work. And then finally, what you really have to step back and ask yourself is, okay, that's the reason for instituting DRM. So is it working? Is it stopping people from pirating content? And the answer is unequivocally no. There is nobody out there that wants to watch a movie that can't afford to spend the $19 to buy the Blu-ray or whatever, that isn't finding a way to get that movie via torrents or Usenet or whatever, right? It's not actually stopping anyone. The only thing it's doing, you might prevent a tiny, barely measurable portion of the population that is not wealthy enough to go afford the media and is also not knowledgeable enough to figure out a way to pirate the media. I mean, there probably is some measurable portion there, but it's not enough to make a huge, a difference. So the vast majority of people that don't want to pay for the content aren't paying for it anyway. And I'll tell you what DRM has really done. What DRM has really done, and this is where they've really screwed themselves over, and I thank you for the call, they have screwed themselves over because people like me would purchase content. I have no problem paying for the content I want to watch. And there's a great site called VHX, and VHX sells DRM-free video content. So anyone can make a documentary or a drama or whatever, and as long as it doesn't have DRM, you can upload it to their site, and then you can resell it. Now, when you go to buy the content, you have two options. You can stream it right there on the site like you would with Netflix, but you also get your entitlement to download an MP4 copy, 1080p, from the website. Now, there is a limit to how many times you can download the local file, so they let you download it like 3 times or something, which I think is reasonable because there's not a limit on the file once you download it. So you can put it on as many of your devices as you want to. And of course, I'm not advocating that anyone actually pirate the media. But if you wanted to take it with and watch it at a friend's house or something, there's nothing software-wise in place to keep you from doing that. Look at what Amazon has done to the media industry. There used to be a time when if you wanted a song, you'd either go buy the CD that had 11 songs you didn't want and one that you did, and then you'd rip the CD and delete the 11 and keep the one. And what Amazon did was they started with, started with things like iTunes, where it had a bunch of DRM, and then it went to things like Amazon, where I can pay 99 cents and download any song I want. Well, I tell you what, it's not worth 99 cents for me to bother with trying to pirate music. It's just not worth it. It's just easier to pay the 99 cents. Oh, and by the way, if you buy a CD, or like when we're talking about music on User Error, and I bought the latest album from I bought both the latest album from Pantera and All That Remains, but the latest album from All That Remains Madness, when I bought the CD, just because I like having the CD, it's kind of cool. I have something physical to put in my collection. I can look at it. They actually gave me a digital entitlement. So I was able to download all that music then on Amazon. Oh, and also, by the way, all of the music I've purchased in the past is available to re-download. And so when you start stacking up, the irritating thing to me is that they are trying to fight technology, whereas if they actually embrace technologies, if these idiots would just stop and think about it for a second, if you embrace the very technology you're trying to prevent people from using, you could actually use it to lessen your job and make more money. If everyone back in the 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if they wouldn't have fought so hard against MP3s, if you think about it, you only have to encode that MP3 one time and stick it up on a website, and a robot can take care of processing the sales, delivering the content. You don't have to pay to make a CD. You don't have to pay to shrink wrap it. You don't have to pay some guy to deliver a box of CDs. You don't have to convince some store owner to buy X number of copies of the CDs to have on hand available in his shop. You don't have to worry about if that CD goes out of date and the next album comes out. You know, how many of those are you going to make? And all, none of that. You don't have to worry about any of that. You just put it up on the site, and however many people want to buy it will buy it. And if they'd embraced that from the beginning, they would have been set. In the movie industry, the TV industry is making the same mistake. They're doing the same dumb things the music industry did 10 years ago. They're making it virtually impossible for you to own your own media. And so what happens is people that can't pay for it anyway are just going to steal it, and there's nothing you can do to stop them. So you're not actually accomplishing anything. The people that wanted to watch the content legally, you're actually making it more difficult for them to do it because there's certain hoops that people like me just aren't going to jump through. And so that's why, that's a huge, long reason of why you should always just get all your content from places like JupiterBroadcasting.com. Because there is no DRM. Because we do just offer everything. Every single show we do on the network is available as a download. In fact, we have long conversations about how many various formats we're going to offer said content. And even if doing that is detrimental to us internally, there's all sorts of, you have no idea the amount of thought that goes into how content gets released. I mean, seriously, the people that are people like Chris should be commended for the amount of time that he puts into catering to the way that you guys want to consume content. It's way more than you'd ever imagine. And we never talk about it because there's nothing sexy about it. And you'll never hear him talk about it, but he spends hours and hours and hours every day trying to figure out what changes he can make to make it easy for everyone to consume content. And none of that is DRM, and we don't even charge you for it. I mean, you can go be a Patreon if you'd like to support the network, patreon.com/JupiterSignal. And you can voluntarily donate some money and say, you know, I really appreciate the content that I get at no expected cost to me every single week. That's something you could do. We don't force you to do that. Although there is a really cool new podcast that's coming out inside of the Jupiter Signal. So if you are a Patreon subscriber, you actually get that content at no additional charge, but you only get it if you're a Patreon. So that's kind of cool. But that's been my answer, is stay away from the places that want to charge me the money. And if I do want to watch that content, I'll go and try and find it in a way that I can get it for DRM free. And I think it's coming. I think that eventually an Amazon or a Google, one of these companies, they're going to step up and they're just going to say, we need to offer content, video content like we offered music content. We need to start leveraging technology rather than fighting against it. And I think if that happens, I think you're going to see a major shift. I think it's going to be really cool. We got time for one more call. If anyone has a question, 855-450-NO. That's 855-450-6624. There is an article that I don't have time to get into because we're at the bottom of the hour, almost out of time, but I'll just briefly touch on it. I'll throw the link in the show notes. If you guys want to read it, I was going to do a big breakdown of it. It's a gentleman that basically compromised the DNS servers of the .io domain. So basically, he found an exploit where he was able to register the name servers for the IO domain, and then he pointed those to his name servers and was able to effectively shut down the entire top-level domain. It's funny because I have a couple of IO domains, so I appreciate the fact that he did it in a very responsible way to make sure that nobody's traffic was actually affected for more than a couple of seconds. But basically, he's got a whole write-up of it. And again, we were going to break it down, but we kind of ran out of time. But it's a really fascinating read. And it's one of those things that I didn't even go looking for. I was just I was doing show prep actually, and across one of my social feeds, somebody posted it, and I was looking at it. I thought, man, that's really interesting. We have to talk about that tonight. And then you guys were such a great audience that we took calls instead. And there's of course nothing wrong with that. If you guys want to support the program, AskNoahShow.com. That's the Ask Noah dashboard. That's what we call it. And basically there is all of the resources you would need to be a part of the show. We take your calls live every Monday night at 6 p.m. Central, jblive.tv, and live 88.3 LPFM in Grand Forks. We're also taking emails live for a couple more weeks. Didn't get any this week. That's okay. Live at AskNoahShow.com. We'd ask that you don't send emails to that address outside of the show, because it is set up on a specific system that I pulled the emails in as almost like a live text stream. And so when you send them outside of the show, then I completely miss them and I don't get a chance to address them because I shut the software down after I get off the air here. But we'd invite you to do that live at AskNoahShow.com, or you can head over to AskNoahShow.com and use the dashboard. There's a contact link there if you want to send in questions outside of our normal showtime, Monday at 6 p.m. That brings us to the end of this week's episode. See y'all back here next week. Huge thank you to Sarah, our call screener, Ben, our producer, and Rakai, our video editor. We'll hand you off to Crosspoint coming up next on Logos Radio, KEQQ 88.3 LPFM, Grand Forks.